Hello, my name is Jim Toot, and I'm an Associate Professor of Political Science at Central Virginia Community College. In this video, we'll discuss making public policy.
Deciding on public policies can be daunting. Consider the complexity of energy policies. Energy policy involves a host of issues, including first, U.S. dependence on foreign oil; second, subsidies for oil and gas companies; third, the risk and costs of allowing offshore drilling for oil; fourth, the dangers posed by nuclear reactors; fifth, coal mine disasters; sixth, the development of alternative technologies; and seventh, global warming. And I'm sure we could add some others to those if we tried. At this point, I'd like you to go to the link at the bottom of this slide and listen to the commentary that John Stewart has on this particular issue. Deciding on public policies can be daunting, as was said. Consider immigration policies. How do we protect the nation's borders? What do we do about illegal immigration? What do we do about those immigrants staying in the country after their temporary visas expire? Should illegal immigrants who have been living in America for some time be granted citizenship? Under what conditions should they be granted citizenship? Should employees who hire illegal immigrants be penalized, even when they claim they cannot distinguish real documents from fakes? Again, a very complicated issue. The political parties differ on many policy issues. These differences may stem from conflicting values. On abortion, the Republican Party is mostly pro-life, while the Democrats are mostly pro-choice, and politicians also espouse or oppose policies in their search for political advantage. For example, many leaders of the Republican Party oppose gay marriage to appeal to those taking that position from a religious or an ideological conviction. The deficit. The policy differ on what to do about the government's several years of trillion-dollar budget deficits. President Obama blamed the spending on two wars: huge tax cuts for the wealthy, and expensive prescription drug programs of the George W. Bush presidency. Republicans blame President Obama's stimulus recovery plan and additional spending on government programs. The economic disaster worsened the deficit by increasing the government's expenditures for unemployment compensation, and because many more people are unemployed, reducing the government's income from taxes. Complicating the situation, roughly 2/3 of the budget expenditure go to entitlements. These are obligations that the government has incurred and must pay, such as for Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, veterans benefits, and interest payments on the national debt. Most of the rest is discretionary spending, funds expended for defense, education, law enforcement, energy programs, and the like. Reducing the deficit will therefore likely require shrinking the growth of entitlement programs, cutting the defense budget, increasing taxes, and eliminating some tax deductions, for example, the interest people pay for their mortgages, charitable donations, non-business, state and local taxes. Unemployment, the economic issue with the most potent political repercussions for the president and both political parties, is unemployment. People's unhappiness about the lack of jobs helps explain the Republican victories and the Democratic's defeat in the 2010 and 2016 elections. The official unemployment rate hovered around 9% in 2011. Adding some 11 million people who have given up looking for jobs or accepted part-time work increased the unemployment to around 17%. The parties differed on how to create jobs and reduce unemployment. For Republicans, it is cutting taxes and reducing regulation of business. For Democrats, the federal government should stimulate the economy by investing in infrastructure, education, child care, and other programs and undertaking public works projects, perhaps also an emergency jobs program. Today, the unemployment rate has receded to about 4.7%, while the underemployment rate remains just under 10%. This is also known as the U6 rate. The BLS, or the Bureau of Labor Statistics, defines U6 as the total unemployed plus all persons marginally attached to the labor force plus total employed part-time for economic reasons as a percent of the civilian labor force, plus all marginally attached workers. Interest groups and policies. Interest groups strive to influence public policy. They seek access to and provide information to policymakers, lobby the institutions of government, and try to use the media to transmit their perspectives and arguments. Here we would mention interest groups known as think tanks. They have an impact on policy because they advocate ideas and specialize in research. They cover the ideological spectrum. The Brookings Institution is centrist. The Center for American Progress is liberal, but until recently once promoting conservative views, such as the American Enterprise Institute or Heritage Foundation, were the most influential. Think tanks market their policy prescriptions to policymakers and the public through public relations and media outreach strategies. Their claimed policy expertise, access to and contact with policymakers, and visibility in the media contribute to their influence on policy. Policymakers track public opinion using polls and the media. For example, in response to public outrage, the Federal Trade Commission established the National Do Not Call Registry in 2003. Prior to the registry setups, telemarketers were making 104 million calls to consumers and businesses every day. For fear of substantial fines, telemarketers no longer call the approximately 109 million telephone numbers on the registry. Policymakers are also skeptical about public opinion, which can be contradictory or unclear. Few of a representative sample of members of Congress, presidential appointees, and civil servants in the senior executive service agreed with the statement that Americans know enough about issues to form wise opinions about what should be done. Not surprisingly, members of Congress were more positive toward the public, with 31% agreeing and additional 17% volunteering that it depends, compared to 13% and 7% respectively of presidential appointees and 4%, 14%, and 3% respectively of civil servants. So policymakers often track public opinion less as a guide to policies they should adopt than to find the frames, arguments, and phrases to try to move it and other policymakers closer to their policy preferences. Much policymaking consists of continuing existing policies or making incremental, that is, small changes to them. Obstacles to change include the separation of powers, the bicameral legislature, the filibuster in the Senate, and the presidential veto. Members of Congress may resist a president's initiative because they view it as bad policy, or think it will damage their re-election prospects, or believe it will hurt their party. Another reason for policy stability is the existence of iron triangles, policy subsystems in a policy area. If you'll recall, we discussed these back during the first semester. These consist of the leading members and staff of the congressional committees or subcommittees that make the laws, the bureaucrats responsible for enforcing the laws, and the interest groups affected by the laws. Policy stability is sometimes punctuated. Significant policy changes and innovations do take place. There are several causes that often overlap. They are changes in control of the government, crises and disasters, and media depictions and framing. They are abetted by public awareness, the involvement of advocacy and interest groups, and policy ideas about what the changes should be. A dramatic shift in policies often follow a sweeping election victory of a president and his party, as with the enactment of the Voting Rights Act and the anti-poverty program of President Lyndon Johnson's Great Society after the 1964 election. Or it happens after a change of party control of Congress. The Republicans enacted elements of their contract with America after they won Congress in 1994. Policy change can follow a change in party control of the presidency, as in the tax cuts and increases in defense spending after Republican Ronald Reagan was elected president in 1980 and George W. Bush was elected in 2000. Rapid policy making takes place after crises or situations portrayed by the president and the media as a crisis. The Patriot Act was passed on October 29, 2001, less than 2 months after the 9/11 attack on the World Trade Center and the Pentagon. For events to change, there usually must be media attention. Useful is a focusing event that puts or elevates an issue into the policy agenda. The near-catastrophic 1979 accident at a nuclear power plant at 3 Mile Island in Pennsylvania raised awareness of nuclear power as a problem rather than a solution to America's energy needs. It stopped new construction of the nuclear plants for many years. Policy changes may become entrenched, eroded, reversed, or reconfigured. In particular, general interest reforms to rationalize government undertakings or to distribute benefits to some broad constituency, such as changes in taxation, are not necessarily sustained. The politicians who achieve them leave the scene or move on to other issues.